At what age did you become interested in writing?
It was understanding that author was a choice I could make. I just didn't understand that. So it wasn't really until sixth grade until I really began to understand that you could be a real person and choose to become an author.
Yeah, that's cool. So, how did you come up with the ideas for your books?
Um, any specifics or just as a general, where do ideas come from?
Yeah, like where do ideas come from?
Okay, for me, ideas is never the problem. To me, ideas are everywhere. And then I think it's just that I have a way of keying into what's around me and finding story. And so to me, as soon as something grabs my attention for any reason, if it grabs my attention, I instinctively begin asking questions about it. And the questions lead to the story. So, for example, if a song comes on the radio, maybe somebody will just listen to the lyrics, but I listen to the lyrics and then I'm saying, well, who would say these lyrics, and why would they say this, and what's the story behind those lyrics? So every song becomes a story idea, every news article becomes a story idea. Just taking a walk creates story if there's something in it to catch my attention.
Cool. Did you have to learn that skill, or did it just automatically come to you as just like loving writing?
Do you know, when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I was doing a lot of theater in Salt Lake City. And the shows I was doing, we would have a Saturday matinee and an evening show, but it was far enough from my house that my mom would just leave me in Salt Lake for the in-between time of the shows. And that was totally fine. I just run up to the mall and hang out, but I had no money. So all I could do was just, I mean, what I would often do is just sit on a bench and just watch the people walk by. And
Yeah.
as they walked by, I would find somebody and try to figure out their story. It was just entertainment. And I was teaching myself that skill of finding story long before I was really seriously thinking about being an author. It was just a way to manage boredom.
That's kind of cool. I sometimes do that. I just like people watch and just like wonder what they're like and want some of their stories.
Well,
So,
people watching, that is the skill. That's
yeah.
exactly, that's all it is. Perfect.
So, out of all your books, False Prince was my favorite. What was your response when it hit the New York Times bestselling list?
Oh my gosh. So it kind of worked like this. Um, I got a call from my editor, and if she calls and it's not scheduled, um, I have this immediate thought of, ooh, it's probably bad news. Like, why would she call? And I don't know she's going to call.
Yeah.
So I just didn't answer. I thought, no, I don't want to take it right now. She can just leave me a message. But she didn't. She called again. And I'm like, oh, it's probably terrible news. So I really didn't listen. So I was really not going to answer this call. And then my editor is like, sending me texts, and she's like, Jen, where are you? Pick up your phone. So then I picked up the phone and she's like, you made the list. And that blew me away because honestly, there is nobody more surprised by the success of The False Prince than I am. So that was a huge surprise.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was like one of your greater works, or do you feel like you have other books that might have been stronger in writing?
You know, I think I don't think about it is in terms of, is that my best or my not best. I think it's one that resonated with a lot of readers in a really cool way. You know, I think there was a lot of uh, readers who are like, I just want to be like him. I want to have kind of that life that he has, or say the things that he says and gets away with it somehow. And so I think it's just one of those stories that just happened to hit this really amazing pocket of readership that not all books do.
So, what was the False Prince story based off of?
um, There was, at the time I had the idea, I was working for a wilderness program here in Utah. Uh, Wilderness is for kids whose lives have gotten so far out of control that their parents just don't know what to do with them. My job was to take all of their psychological testing, IQ testing, their history, and to compile it into one report for their families. And I did this for hundreds of kids. I learned a lot about kids whose lives were in trouble. But of all of them, there was one boy that stood out to me more than any other. This is a boy who never obeyed the rules, never did as he was told. This boy was so defiant. His parents knew if we stick him on a plane to Salt Lake City, he will disappear mid-flight. Nobody will ever know what happened to him. And so something had to happen different for this kid. He was asleep in bed one night. A man about the size of a small mountain grabbed this kid, pulled him out of bed, and said, "Get your shoes on, we're going now." And this man hand walked this kid into wilderness. All right. When you start wilderness, you don't get your shoes. You start like barefoot. And you have to earn your shoes. You have to earn your backpack. You have to earn your sleeping bag. And they thought, this kid is so tough, he's never going to earn any of it. He's going to flunk out of the program. But to everybody's surprise, this kid was first to earn every single marker of the line. And so everybody thought, okay, you know what? He just needed rules. He just needed structure because he's doing so great. And he was doing great. In fact, this kid was the first to earn the right to send a letter home to his parents. And the letter didn't take very long to write. It was, "Dear Mom and Dad." He put in a couple of swear words and sent it off. And I thought, I like this kid, right? I mean, I don't want to raise this kid.
Yeah.
But I sure did want to write about him. He became a great inspiration for Sage.
That's really cool. So I've often wondered about the backstory behind Sage and if there was anybody that you actually based it off of. So
well, there's a few, but he's the main, yeah.
Yeah. So what separates your writing from another author's writing?
Every author has a voice, right? Voice is your signature. It is the way that you would know it is a Rick Riordan book or a J.K. Rowling book or, a Cassandra Clare book. It is all of it. It is voice. And because voice is like an author's signature, it's always going to be unique to you. I think what I hear back from readers a lot is it is the balance of that constant feeling of danger with enough snark that it just kind of keeps you laughing or smiling a lot, even though there is so much danger and that things can go south really fast. And I think I also am maybe a little unique in my in the main characters. They're all very flawed, very ordinary people who become very heroic.
Yeah. Some of the other authors' books I read, their characters are almost like have like superpowers or something. When I read yours, I can kind of relate to the characters just because they're just like normal, average people. That's
Thank you. Cool. Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah. So, when I read your bio, I saw something about you were writing a book about lockpicking, but you had to halt it because locksmith wouldn't allow you to research anymore on the subject. What happened there?
All right. So I told you 6th grade is about the time that I thought maybe I could become an author. And so I was working on this story of this girl. Oh, in fact, I can actually show you. All right. So this is the folder I stole from my brother because at the time it was the coolest folder we had. It was for Disney's Black Hole. The movie's awful, but it was a cool folder. And so I was writing this story right here. This is my hot chocolate stain, my doodles, about a girl who has this crazy imagination. And then one day, everything she imagines really starts to happen. And there came a point where she got locked into a room and she was going to have to pick the lock. All right, it's before Google, it's before You can't just go to a library and ask for their lock picking section. But if I was going to be a real author, I would do what real authors do, call a locksmith. And that just felt so normal to me. And so I got on the phone and I was like, hi, yeah, can you tell me how to pick a lock? And he yelled at me. And
Oh,
he said, you hang up this phone. You go tell your mother what you're trying to do. And I screamed, ah, and hung up the phone and ran away and hid. Um, and I eventually left my hiding place, but my character never did. That became the last words I ever wrote on the story. And so it ended in a disaster. And for a long time, I didn't write again. I told you I still had all those ideas, but I thought, I could never become an author or he would have taken me seriously.
so have you, and how many of your other stories have you had to investigate like that for?
Do you know what? There is there is all sorts of stuff I will do to get the information that I might need. Um, and so, yeah, if it's a matter of calling people, if it's a matter of sneaking into places that maybe I ought not be, or about just reaching out for questions, like I always figure the worst thing, if the worst thing is going to happen is somebody tells me no or get out,
Yeah,
I can handle that. Like I no longer am afraid by a no or a rejection. I'm just like, I'll totally go for it.
yeah. So, who has been your biggest supporter through all of your writing, such as your husband or a mentor or your kids?
Absolutely, hands down, my husband. Uh, he always, I mean, in the years that it was taking me to become a writer, he never discouraged me. He never said, maybe you should give up. He just always like, hey, that's your thing. Do that thing, whether you succeed at it or not, if this is what you love. And there's no way I could do my job now without his support. It would be impossible without him. So I'm very appreciative of what he does for me.
Yeah, it's good to have somebody to just kind of like be there for you and just kind of like push you through the times, even though so when you're like feeling trouble and just like to keep you there. So it's good to have that. What do you like most about being an author?
Um, I mean, there's a few things. I think it's an incredible thing. I think it's absolutely incredible that something can start as an idea in my head and it can just turn and it doesn't belong to anybody but my imagination. And then as I start to write it down, it belongs to me and the paper. And then it'll belong to me and the paper and my editor. And a few steps past that, and it belongs to the world. And the whole world can have this story, this thing that just started as this idea in my head. I find that amazing. I love interacting with young people, with readers. I think that's an amazing thing. And I love that I can follow all the time my imagination, my passion. If I want to learn more about something, I can write it. And so I'm always chasing a dream. And I think that's fascinating.
What would be the hardest part of being an author?
The hardest thing, there's a few. It is really hard to not be able to write everything that's in my head all the time, and to know that there might be some stories that I think are fantastic that I might never be able to get around to. That's super frustrating. It's um, it's sometimes a frustration when um, you you get feedback from a reader who and it's not like it's a bad review. I have no problem with that. If they didn't like the book, they didn't like the book. But if somebody maybe I think didn't get the book,
Yeah,
like they interpret something wrong, and I always go back to, oh, if I had written that section better, they would have connected with it. And so there's always a little piece of if only I could write better, that always messes with us, because writing is an art and art will never be perfect. And so that always, I think, is in my mind that I'll never be perfect at this.
so like when you're writing, what do you need complete silence or do you like background like noise just to kind of like keep you centered?
Um, if it's relatively quiet, I don't need complete silence. For a first draft, though, it's I can't have a lot of distractions, that's a little bit much. But when I'm rewriting, there can be other distractions and I can stay focused. So, but that initial creation, quiet really helps. And if I can't get quiet, I can turn on like some music without lyrics, and that'll
Yeah,
fill the gap like white noise, and that's fine.
yeah. I like white noise and instrumental music. It's just kind of like keeps me centered on school and stuff. So,
Exactly.
who is your favorite author? Like, what inspires you out of their works?
I mean, there's a lot of authors that I love, and I just who I think are fantastic. I think Linda Mullally Hunt is amazing. Ali Condi's work I adore. I think Alan Gratz, the stuff he writes is fantastic. And there's several, but I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of J.K. Rowling as well, and not only because I love the Harry Potter books, but I think if you understand that, like by about book 3 or 4, her books are these international phenomenons, and every word she says is dissected. Every word she writes is analyzed by all over the world, and people who would go through her garbage, aim long range lenses into her home just to see what she'd be typing. All of these crazy things happening to her. And under that much pressure, you'd see most writers' work suffer. Most writers you'd see their work go down. But J.K. Rowling only got better and better and better. And anyone who can get better as a writer under all that pressure will always have my respect.
Yeah. So, how are you able to write in so many different genres, such as like sci-fi, fiction, history?
Yeah, when I turned in my first historical manuscript, I think my editor was a little surprised and just saying, no, you're a fantasy writer. And I said, no, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, but if genre is going to be an issue, I'm just going to create my own genre. And that's going to be danger. I just write about characters in danger. And under that umbrella, I can write fantasy, I can write historical fiction or sci-fi or contemporary. It's just I now have my own umbrella. I write about danger.